Hey there YouTube lovers, my name is BB8 and today I am going to share my concept for what a Pokemon game set in the future could be. I've wanted to do a future set Pokemon game. I've wanted to talk about this for quite a bit, and I think around the launch of Pokemon Legends Arceus, I was triggered to do this. But I was also triggered even further when the whole concept of Paradox Pokemon was introduced. It's just, I've wanted to talk about this for a while. I just struggled to come up with a fitting title for this game. But what if but what Pokemon game is next in line for a Legends game, excluding remakes? If you ignore Johto, I would probably say Unova is next in line for a Legends game. But what if Unova didn't get a Legends game at all? What if Unova got the opposite? And that is where my idea for Pokemon Visions comes in. And without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? For the gameplay, Pokemon Visions wouldn't end up taking elements from Legends Arceus in any form. And Pokemon Visions would end up taking its own approach and won't play out like the other Pokemon games. The game will have players pick one of three paths, similar to Cyberpunk 2077 but less adult. The three paths you can choose are Student, Scavenger, and Bandit. And you can play as an 18-year-old in the game, which means unlike past Pokemon games where you play as like a child or a teenager, you play as an 18-year-old in Pokemon Visions, which does take a different approach for the series. So the three roles, I'm going to dive deep into them. The student role has you enrolling at the Castelia City University of Technology and Robotics, where you end up studying robotics and science. This role has the player go around the Unova County, as it's called in this game, doing research on Pokemon and even going to scrapyards around the Unova wastelands to fight rusted robotic Pokemon in order to obtain new parts that players can use to build brand new robotic Pokemon that you can use in Pokemon battles. But I will get into the whole battle system in a bit. I'm just going to cover these roles. The college you have enrolled at does have a Pokemon League of its own, with students from all around the Unova County taking part. And the professor is trying to build a powerful robotic Pokemon, but can't find the rare parts he needs in order to build this robotic Pokemon. The Scavenger role has lived in the wastelands of the Unova County since they were forced to evacuate from their region after a legendary Pokemon went rogue and attacked their home, and had been forced to evacuate and had been living in the Unova County wastelands for 6 years before the events of Pokemon Visions. This role has players uncover an experiment that had been hidden for years, and it's your job to uncover its secrets. And the Bandit role has the player a part of the region's evil team. And the evil team does have its own society apart from Castelia City in the Unova Wastelands. Similar to Overwatch's Junkertown, It's similar to that. And this society builds robots of their own out of scrapped robots that they can use in Pokemon robot fights. And the role also has you go on various tasks for the region's evil team and has the player sabotaging the city. For the map, Pokemon Visions would end up taking place in Unova 300 years after the events of Black and White. Similar to how Legends Arceus took place around 300 years before Diamond and Pearl, Pokemon Visions would end up taking place 300 years after Black and White. And a lot has changed in the Unova region since you've last visited, and it is now known as the Unova County. And unlike Legends Arceus, Pokemon Visions will be a completely open world game with 6 different areas that players can explore to their heart's content. And I have color coded each area to indicate which areas are where in the Unova region. And Castelia City will be in the same place it was in Black and White, but Castelia City being the capital of the Unova County, which has been expanded since Black and White took place. And the desert area behind Castelia has now turned into buildings and is now a part of Castelia City. And the city has had a drastic makeover, giving it a more sci-fi futuristic appearance. Downtown Castelia, if you choose the student role, Downtown Castelia will technically act as like the starter town, as in like traditional Pokemon games, and you will end up starting in Downtown Castelia. Downtown Castelia would end up taking elements from Brooklyn, and the setting of Downtown Castelia will slowly transition into Castelia City. The Unova Wastelands, if you choose either the Scavenger or the Bandit roles, you will start in the Unova Wasteland. This area will draw inspiration from the American-style deserts, the Australian outback, and the desert wastelands. Also, Junkertown from Overwatch, which will end up being the evil team's society within the game. And this area is where you will be able to find wild Pokemon and rusted robotic Pokemon. The Unova Wilds, apart from Castelia City, is the only greenery left in the region, since you will be seeing a whole bunch of greenery around Castelia City. The Unova Wilds would be the only organic greenery left within the region. The Phantom Corporation HQ, the Phantom Corporation would end up being the evil corporation of Pokemon Visions. You will come here later in the game in order to stop the Phantom Corporation to unleash their secret project, being the Iron Blast, which is a robotic Mewtwo. And finally, for the Castelia City University of Technology and Robotics, if you choose the student role, this location will be an essential part of the game. Here, you will enroll in a program which dives deep into the research of robotic Pokemon and their behaviors. You can come here to build new robotic Pokemon out of parts you can get from rusted robotic Pokemon. And for the robotic Pokemon themselves, Pokemon Visions will have a new kind of Pokemon called a robotic Pokemon. It's not like a type or anything like that. it's a kind of Pokemon which will have two kinds, being the standard robotic Pokemon and the rusted robotic Pokemon. Standard robotic Pokemon are safe and can be seen everywhere around Castelia City, downtown Castelia, and the Castelia City University of Technology and Robotics. These Pokemon have multiple purposes. They can be used for Pokemon battles, transportation, or giving help across the city, such as Iron Synthesis, which is a robotic Pokemon equivalent to Meganium, providing solar energy to power electricity across the entire region. The rusted Pokemon, on the other hand, are dangerous, and these Pokemon can be found in the Unova Wastelands and haven't been touched in over 50 years, after these Pokemon have had viruses attached to them. You can battle rusted robotic Pokemon in order to get new parts in order to build robotic Pokemon of your own. Any Pokemon who appeared as a Paradox Pokemon previously will appear in Pokemon Visions as a robotic Pokemon. For the battles would work quite differently in Pokemon Visions compared to previous games, but the human character can still run around whilst fighting, similar to Pokemon Legends Arceus, with the introduction of robotic Pokemon fights. You can go around the Unova County to compete in robotic Pokemon fights, which do work like the bot fights from Big Hero 6, my favorite Disney film, and I heavily recommend it, but have the Pokemon battle element in there. The robotic Pokemon fights do behave like tournaments, unlike Big Hero 6, which do replace Pokemon gyms in Visions compared to previous games. And there is 24 robotic fight clubs around the Unova County that you can take part in. And you can also do a robotic Pokemon fight online as well. For the starters for Pokemon Visions would end up taking the same approach as Pokemon Legends Arceus, and the starters would end up being past starters and not new ones. You obtain them in their normal forms, and their final evolutions would end up being a Pokemon robotic Pokemon hybrid, similar to like a cyborg, and it's kind of similar to how Pokemon Legends Arceus had the final evolutions altered to look different. So, who are the starters of Pokemon Visions? Out of curiosity? Well, Bulbasaur would end up being the grass starter, and Bulbasaur would end up evolving into Venusaur, but the only difference with Venusaur is that Venusaur would end up blending with Iron Root, which would end up being the robotic Pokemon for Venusaur. It would end up having solar panels on its back, which help it absorb the energy from the sun in order to use attacks that involve solar energy. The fire starter would end up being Fennekin. Fennekin would end up evolving into Delphox, but the only difference with Delphox is that Delphox will be blended in with Iron Mage. And the Pokemon would end up having a robotic coat around its body. And for the water starter, we have Sobble. Sobble would end up evolving into Inteleon. But the difference is that Inteleon will end up being a blend with Iron Stealth, which will end up being the robotic Pokemon form for Inteleon. And this Pokemon would end up having a visor, which gives it advanced visions and aimbot when hunting down targets. It also has advanced camouflage as well. For the story, there is 3 paths to the story, like I've just said. But unlike past Pokemon games, your choices will affect the story of the game as well. Similar to how the Outer Worlds has your choices affect the story, and I'm presuming the upcoming Outer Worlds 2 is going to do this as well. And similar to Cyberpunk 2077, there is 3 different paths and roles you can take within Pokemon Visions. But the events of each role are canon even if you don't play as that role. And you will get access to the Pokemon Visions DLC no matter which role you choose. So the first role I'm going to explain the story of is the student role. The student role has the player growing up in downtown Castelia, who had recently enrolled for the Castelia City University of Technology and Robotics. You end up moving to the university in like a dorm room, and then you meet Professor Cassia, and she ends up introducing you to the campus, the students, and afterwards the starter Pokemon you will end up taking on your journey with you. And you are then in class learning how to build robotic Pokemon from leftover rusted Pokemon parts. And you end up getting assigned with a task that has you trying to build robotic Pokemon, which would end up being the Pokemon Visions equivalent to Titan Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, as well as the boss Pokemon from Pokemon Legends Arceus. Meaning that these robotic Pokemon will be essential to the story and will end up being the key to finding the part that Professor Cassia needs in order to build Iron Blast, known as Mewtwo. Meaning that the final boss in the game will end up being Iron Blast. Which, of course, Professor Cassia doesn't end up being the villain in the game, but after Iron Blast catches like a virus, that is where Iron Blast goes rogue. And you have to stop and delete the virus of Iron Blast before Castelia City gets destroyed. The Scavenger role has the player start off in the Unova Wastelands that had been living off what they find, such as food, resources, and water. The Scavenger then spots a mysterious figure in the distance and follows it to a town within the Unova Wastelands, neighbouring the society where Team Doom, known as the evil team of Pokemon Visions, which I will dive into in a sec, that had been hiding for their entire life. You end up, you meet up with this mysterious figure, who is also a scavenger who needs help on uncovering one of the biggest secrets of the Unova Wastelands. After choosing your starter, you are then set with the task to go around the Unova County in order to find the clues to the Unova Wasteland's biggest secret, which doesn't connect to the student role in any form, but this So which means the town that neighbours the society where Team Doom have been hiding is supposed to feel like Jakku from Star Wars The Force Awakens, even though it's not like on a planet or any form like that. But still, that's where this mysterious town is taking inspiration from. And finally, for the Bandit role, unlike the other roles where you end up encountering Team Doom in an enemy style way, you are a part of Team Doom in this role. And you start off in Doomville, a society that isolates itself from the rest of the Unova County. And the only way you can get in is if you are a part of Team Doom. And no citizen from Doomsville is allowed to leave unless they are a part of Team Doom. In the story, you try and apply for Team Doom and you end up being accepted as a part of them. And you have to go across the Unova County in order to cause some mischievous activity in order to prepare for the big heist of Castelia. As the Bandit role, you can participate in Doomville races in Revavroom powered vehicles, which you can customize to be uniquely yours. For the Amiibo, unfortunately, Pokemon Visions will only have one Amiibo, consisting of the box art Pokemon Iron Blast. But all Smash Bros. And Detective Pikachu series Amiibo will still be compatible with Pokemon Visions, providing new parts for each Pokemon. The online will work the same way as it did in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, allowing players to connect to each other's games no matter what role they chose. Similar to the Union Circle, but the only difference is with Pokemon Visions there's no terror raids. Pokemon Home will be supported with Pokemon Visions, but will be implemented in a post-launch update. And you can battle your Pokemon online regularly, like in past games as well. For the sequel, Pokemon Visions would end up receiving a sequel around 3 to 4 years after the first Pokemon Visions had been released, to give the Visions team a bit more time to develop a No Man's Sky style space travel system that will define the Visions series. Which means Pokemon Visions and Pokemon Visions Astronomy would end up entering active development at the same time, but Pokemon Visions Astronomy would end up taking longer to develop because of the new gimmicks within the game. So, for example, the automatically generated space travel system for Astronomy would end up being the key gimmick of the sequel. And Pokemon Visions Astronomy would end up being the title of the sequel. And Unova doesn't return as a hub region this time around. The hub region would end up going to Hoenn this time, since Hoenn is more known for space travel than Unova is, suggesting that each Visions installment won't tie in with a remake or a Legends game at all. The hub regions in Visions will mainly be based on a new gimmick that is introduced in that installment of Visions, and which region would fit that gimmick. So in the case of Astronomy, Hoenn fits Pokemon Visions Astronomy. And finally, for the release structure. Pokemon Visions would end up being announced during the August Pokemon Presents, which does go off tradition compared to past Pokemon games that get announced in a February Pokemon Presents, meaning that Pokemon Visions would end up having a different release strategy, meaning that a new Pokemon Visions game would release in June and not January or November, unlike the mainline Pokemon games / remakes or Pokemon Legends. It will be confirmed that Pokemon Visions won't be attached to the lore of the Unova region, and it will do its own separate thing instead, and expand on the Paradox Pokemon concept that was introduced in Scarlet and Violet, meaning that Pokemon that appeared as Paradox Pokemon previously will return in Pokemon Visions. They then show off 6 new Paradox Pokemon consisting of Iron Root, which will be Venusaurs, Iron Jet for Charizard, Iron Shell for Blastoise, Iron Mage for Delphox, Iron Shadow for Greninja, and Iron Arrow for Decidueye, which end up being the first batch of Robotic Pokemon revealed for the game, and then the Pokemon Presents ends. Pokemon Visions is mentioned in the September Nintendo Direct, but no additional information is provided about the game. A Pokemon Presents then happens in the beginning of January, similar to the one we had for the Sword and Shield DLC, but Pokemon Legends Celebi would end up releasing the first Friday of that February. That will be the main focus of that Pokemon Presents. But some details are revealed about Pokemon Visions, as well as revealing the box art Pokemon to be Iron Blast, alongside the release date being the final Friday of June. Pokemon Visions had been revealed during the February Nintendo Direct that you can visit the Moon and Mars at some point within the game, setting up the gimmick for its sequel. And yet they do confirm in the Direct as well that Pokemon Visions will develop space travel as the sequel progresses, and a sequel has been confirmed through the Direct as well. And that had been in the works around the same time as Pokemon Visions, but the sequel took longer in order to implement No Man's Sky style space travel, being the major element of the sequel onwards, suggesting that each new installment of Pokemon Visions will expand on what the Pokemon world could be like in the distant or far future. Another Pokemon Presents occurs at the end of February, providing more details about Pokemon Visions. The presentation reveals more about the game's story and what the gameplay of Pokemon Visions is actually like. And the final presentation for Pokemon Visions would end up being a Pokemon Visions Nintendo Direct. Not a Pokemon Presents, a proper Nintendo Direct, focused on Pokemon Visions, revealing 1 hour of information to players. The director of Pokemon Visions then confirms that Pokemon Visions, unlike Scarlet and Violet, as well as Pokemon Legends Arceus, will have AMD Fidelity Effects technology packed within the game, similar to Splatoon 3, Nintendo Switch Sports, Life is Strange True Colors, and Sonic Frontiers, in order to make sure that the players have the best experience with Pokemon Visions. The game would then end up releasing on the final Friday of June. So guys, what did you think of my concept video for Pokemon Visions? I have wanted to do a concept video for a future set Pokemon game, I think for quite a bit. I think it's since Pokemon Legends Arceus launched, but I was triggered even further when the whole concept of Paradox Pokemon was actually introduced. So I have had the idea for Pokemon Visions for quite some time, I just couldn't come up with a title for the game. But when I came up with Pokemon Visions, I knew I had to start writing the video. But then, at the end of the day, this is my final video before the move. Meaning that I will be recording A New Foe Has Appeared 73 within the week, but it won't be out until next Tuesday. So, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss another concept video like this one. And I will see you all in a future video. BB8 out.